So this session, I always want to greet everyone. Thank you for attending the third annual Black Family Homeschool Educators and Scholars virtual teach-in. So happy to have you all here. I can't believe how quickly the day is going and that we're already in our fourth session. And this tailoring your homeschooling to your child's special needs, I knew was going to be a hot ticket, because one of the biggest concerns that a lot of families have when deciding to homeschool is believing or knowing that their child has special educational needs, and will they be good enough to respond to those needs if their child is not in a traditional school setting. So today we have two outstanding moms who are homeschooling their children, who have been long-term members of our and loving members of our homeschooling community, that I'm so pleased are going to be in the speaker seat today. We have first Tonita Austin. She is a solo parenting. I love that, by the way, solo parenting, not single parent, but solo parenting writer, a poet, a singer, and an activist who mothers two daughters who she calls two children, excuse me, that she calls twice exceptional teenagers. One is a 19-year-old son and one is a 15-year-old daughter. She is self-employed and has owned her own business for 21 years, and she lives outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Our next speaker is Amelia Peace. Amelia Peace is an award-winning author of the children's book, A Lone Bird, a story about autism. She is also an autism advocate who has spent years sharing her experience about educating and raising a child with autism. Amelia's daughter, Robin, is on the autism spectrum, and she is nonverbal. Amelia and Robin began their homeschooling journey in 2018, and Amelia hopes her family's journey will be an inspiration to Black families interested in homeschooling. So welcome to both of my fantastic guests. Good to see you. How are you all doing?
Oh, Khadija, lady. Oh, I missed you so much.
I miss you back.
Yes. I'm so happy to just be here for this third annual teaching conference. So it's been a blast. I've had so much fun. So yeah, I'm just excited to be here.
And can I just tell you that I call you, I don't know if I've ever said it to you directly, but I call you Sunshine. Whenever I see a message from you, you are just the most positive person ever. And it's unsolicited. And so just so you all know, she'll like shoot me beautiful emails. And I got an email from you. I don't even know if I got a chance to respond, but you made me cry. Everyone has seen me cry this teaching. I am just, oh my God, I'm just open, y'all. I'm just feeling all this love and this energy. And so all you gotta say to me is boo, and I'll start crying because I'm just so overwhelmed with joy and just happiness. But Amelia, you just always are sending me unsolicited notes of positivity. You are sharing, and I just appreciate you. And, Tonita, I feel the same about you as well. I remember you from our first teaching. And I remember that look in your face where you were like, I don't know about this in expletive. I don't know if this is for me. But you showed up and you asked questions. I think you were in my breakout group on the first one. I even remember you were at a parenting workshop that I had, but you are just a scholar of this. You have taken this so seriously, and to have you present this year is so powerful to me. And I'm just the two of you being speakers this year, yeah, I feel goosebumps now, because I have seen your journey with building your practice as homeschooling parents. And so I want the people that are on this call to know that these are two mamas who have been very serious and intentional with their homeschooling practice. And the wisdom that they're imparting to you today is not, it's not going to be about, what do they call platitudes, just stay positive. Blah, blah, blah. This is the stuff that we're going to talk about today is based on your experiences. And so before I get started, I would love, just for folks who have tuned into this call, I would love for them to begin sharing with you so that when we get to questions, if they can share in the chat what is the reason why they showed up for this session today. So if they want to share their
Oh yeah,
own
excellent.
particular situation, a question that they had before they joined the call, if they can start typing those in the chat, so we have something to go back to when we take a pause during the conversation. How does that sound?
Oh yeah, that sounds perfect. Yeah,
Okay.
so feel free, tune in and chime in anytime in the chat.
Awesome. So let's get started. I think to provide context, I've shared my own personal experience engaging with both of you all, but I think it's important for the people who are in this session to know you all's history. So if you can just share, give us the biopic, the short mini series, not even that long, right? But just
Right.
the version of what led you to homeschool. I think it's important for folks to hear that. And I guess we can start with you, Tonita.
You said short. It was a long journey, but I guess if I could pick one thing, it was the debilitating anxiety my daughter experienced in public school because of her various challenges, some that we didn't know at the time, but I found her like hugging trees when she came out of school. And that told me that she was really struggling. And it manifested physically, which I'll talk about later. So that's why I decided I pulled her out.
When okay, I have a question after that, but I would love for Amelia to jump in. And in the introduction, I gave the ages of both of you all's children, but just so we can reiterate, Tonita, you have 2 teenagers currently, and Amelia, if you can tell us about your what led you to homeschooling, and a little bit about where your daughter is age-wise.
Right. So yes, my situation or story is pretty much similar. My daughter, she's 6 years old now. When she was in preschool, Robin, she had quite a bit of anxiety going into preschool, which I felt, her being the only child, it was my way as a parent, thought at that time, it was, hey, let her kind of get accommodated to her class, acclimated with the whole school setting and so forth. But that wasn't the case. We learned quickly in her preschool journey that wasn't really the best fit for her. It was disappointing because the teacher would describe Robin as someone who was very, very disruptive in class. She's nonverbal, so at times, if she wanted to communicate at the age of 3, because she was in preschool, it will be through screaming, or she'll tug and pull on a person. And the teacher, I felt, really didn't receive that well. So it was always a conversation, me picking her up from preschool after work about, hey, maybe we should start looking into these strategies and so forth. And I was explaining to the teacher and also to the principal at one time, because I guess there was an incident with Robin about her constantly leaving the classroom. It was to the point of my parenting was being questioned. So during that journey and that process, I was very upset too, because that same week, a lot of stuff was happening within. She was only in preschool for a month, but during that week span where I finally pulled her out of school, she left the classroom. The teacher didn't know where she was at. She was basically lost in the school for about 20 minutes or so. They found Robin on the second level of the school, and she had issues with walking at that time. So she went upstairs on her own. I don't know if she crawled up the stairs or, made her way up at that time, but it was the last straw, and I pulled her out. It was a knee-jerk reaction. I really wanted to call the police, but, it was more to the point of, it was an experience she didn't like, I didn't like, and we just took it from there, and I decided to homeschool her full time.
Wow. So that means when we met with you and when you started attending, she was 4 at the time. That's correct.
Yes.
So
Yes.
this was very, very it was close to all of these things happening. Tell me this, ladies, what was that transition like? So you made this decision that the school wasn't serving the needs of your children, and this was kind of, you had those last straw moments. what then did that transition start to look like? What were some of those things that you started to do to prepare and to begin this homeschooling journey for your children?
So I guess my daughter's 15 now. The first time I pulled her out of school was in third grade. And again, it was kind of a knee jerk, like, we're not doing this anymore, reaction to, they had changed their math program, and she would literally vomit the morning of math exams. And I just said, we're not doing this. I didn't know what I was doing, but after spring break, we're not coming back. And so I was still self-employed, solo parent, meaning only financial support, no other support. So I would just kind of take her with me as I could. And it just got to the point where I couldn't do both. And so I had the idea that, to homeschool, I had to have a curriculum. Everything I read felt so overwhelming. Like, I cannot do this by myself. There's no way I can, support this family and do this. And so I found a progressive white school. We're in the suburbs of Philadelphia, that had like open lands and small classrooms. And it just seemed like the perfect place for, the kind of midway, between school and homeschooling. And I thought that was the greatest place for her, but it was not. So we discovered there, after she went through this probably one of the most traumatic experiences that I've ever had, was and eventually diagnosed with conversion disorder, which is when the brain cannot manage the amount of stress and it starts to shut down the body. So she went from like 10-year-old running around to, we had wheelchairs and a potty in her room, because I would have to physically lift her up and then try to get her doctor's appointments. And so that took 3 weeks of hospitalization at, different doctors. I had to get a second opinion. People thought she had a concussion. Nobody knew. It's such a rare disorder. Nobody knew. And so I finally went to Children's Hospital, and they diagnosed it and gave her like physical therapy, occupational therapy, psychotherapy, art therapy, music therapy, and finally got her brain to be okay with, what she had to manage as a young person. So the private school pretty much said, okay, well, she's got dysgraphia, dyscalculia, also fairly rare. We can't manage her. And so my only choice, I felt at the time, was, well, let's try public school again. They'll give her all the support she needs, which we did, and it seemed to work well until, so that was 6th grade. Now we're in 6th grade. And then 7th grade, they removed a lot of her supports because she was like getting A's and everything. And then that's when we started seeing school refusal, panic attacks in the morning. Like, I had to learn how to bring her down from a complete panic attack to the point where I would keep a paper bag in her room, and it would take a half an hour or so to get her dressed and to school. And one day I just thought, this is insane, but the schools would tell me that I was doing her a disservice by not allowing her to manage this type of stress, or not giving her the opportunity to work through it. And
wow. So you had people literally say this to you directly, that you're the cause of this behavior, because this is something that they hadn't seen before. So it had to be something that you weren't doing as a parent.
yeah, and even they pulled in, the lack of having a father.
Oh no.
They would pull writings, or if she would write she was missing her dad, and they would come to me and say, do you know? I'm like, yeah, she's been missing her dad for quite a number of years. Like, that is not the reason why she's struggling here.
Right.
And so it was about 40 hours of IEP meetings and school meetings and constantly coming back and saying, this isn't working. This is not what she needs. This is what she needs. And so this was seventh grade.
Oh, that's a lot. Oh,
The
yes.
first month of seventh grade, I said, we're not doing this anymore. And that was the first year I came here. And the
Yeah.
whole time I just started getting with other groups of like unschooling, learning about
Mm-hmm.
deschooling and decolonizing learning. And I
Mm-hmm.
was just really like sucking up all the information I could get. My mother transitioned when I was in my first trimester with my son.
Oh,
So I
wow.
spent like my motherhood trying to like learn what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
So I, like you said, I was just using all kinds of resources, and I finally, found kind of the magic after all of that.
Well, I want to come back to that and find out what that magic is, because what you're sharing right now speaks to the fact that even when we think of a child with special needs, it's not always around this idea of learning. And even as you talk about, she was making A's, the school's like, good, she's good now, she's fine.
Right.
But it's all of these other supports and services that she was in need of. Amelia, can you share your story as well, what that transition was like?
Right. Yeah, most definitely. So it was a knee-jerk reaction, like I mentioned before, to pull her out of the school, because I felt we weren't really connecting well between, the educator and what Robin needed. So at that time, family was pretty much on my case. Uh, so Robin was diagnosed officially at that time with autism, and she that following year was diagnosed with ADHD, which we kind of figured ADHD was probably going to be coupled with it. So a lot of my family and I co-parent with her father, who's living in Arkansas at the time. I'm in Wisconsin. It was really the question of, hey, what are you going to do next? Are you going to put her back in school? She needs to be in school. What's going to happen? I mean, I took it upon myself for maybe that year to do homeschooling. I did not have the support at all because my family was just like, this is not what you should be doing with her. So it was very disheartening because I was really solo in my endeavors to kind of homeschool her officially for that year. So we want to fast forward a little bit. So we get into COVID, and I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and so a lot of schools go virtual. So with the insistence of my family and her father, it was like, hey, maybe you should integrate her back and try virtual schooling, and then see if that's something she will eventually like. So I said, okay. I wasn't really too happy with that, but I felt, let me try to be a team player with this whole thing. And we did virtual schooling. That was terrible. Robin did not, uh, goodness, she did not have a good time at all during virtual. She did not stay in front of the screen. She's someone who likes to physically interact and learn. So her sitting in front of a laptop and trying to engage with her peers was not a good thing. So most of the time I'm in front of the screen trying to explain to teachers like, okay, this is how we're going to do the assignment. And I felt it was kind of redundant after a while because I'm like, she's not really learning if I'm constantly on the screen explaining to you what I'm doing with her after classes. And so we had a few parent teacher conferences where it was, hey, just stick it out and, keep this going and she'll, get used to it. And she didn't. So after maybe a year, I decided we're not going to do this. And I officially took her out for virtual. I was still homeschooling to the extent of me doing it part-time, but to me, I've always homeschooled her. So it was really natural for me. It was more getting my family on board with my decision. I'm really close with our family, so it was very important to me that they understood what I wanted for her. So once I'm gonna say we get into maybe 2.5 years of me consistently homeschooling her, my family was finally on board. And we've been homeschooling ever since. I've had issues with IEPs where that wasn't effective for us at all. I've always advocated for her when things um, did not look good on an IEP, and I would question it. And it was constantly me making sure, like, hey, is she getting the resources that she needed? So that was stressful as well. So the IEPs alone was stressful. Medical issues I had to deal with, trying to explain to them, like, hey, she has feeding aversions and difficulties. She knows how to chew, but her ability to chew and swallow was always an issue. So it was just always a problem. So I felt I know my child best, so I can do this. And being a part of this group really helped me and gave me the confidence to just move forward and just do it full time. Oh, and then also to add, I had to quit my job. So that
Oh,
was a
wow.
whole can of worms because I had to talk to her father. He moved from Arkansas to Wisconsin because I mentioned to him, I said, hey, this is, I'm going to need help. Can you help me? He struggled with that, but he got a transfer to Wisconsin because he's a truck driver at the time. And so we made it work. But, that transition alone was just very stressful.
Yeah, I hear so many things in both you and Tonita's story in terms of that decision to transition to homeschooling required so much of a mind shift, but it came at a cost in terms of continue, you had to make some adjustments, you had to make some adjustments, and you also had reached your limit where you had just depended on the school system to provide these supports, where at a point you just realize they're not going to come, right? And so I think I would love to hear what some of those resources were that you had to start implementing and drawing from for your homeschool practice. When you start talking about successes, Tonita, and you talk about, Amelia, that you had to quit your job, I'm sure this means that you starting now to put in place a practice or a routine for your children, pulling from different spaces, because even though you're the curator of this learning experience, you're not the one doing everything for your child, right? And so I see Naya is actually the only person that that shared in the chat that she has a 9-year-old with ADHD and school anxiety and will be homeschooling for the first time this year. So I think now's a good time to kind of explain what are those things, those resources that you had to pull and that you have begun to incorporate in your homeschooling practice that give the supports to your child for them to be successful as homeschoolers.
Well, I can say I had to look at both her academic and her emotional needs, and not just focus on, well, what are we going to be learning? Our first year homeschooling, there was no curriculum. We didn't have a schedule. I was trying to figure it out, and I just had to let myself off the hook, because she was so damaged by all the systems that she was in, that I really wanted her, like, building up her self-esteem and her mental wellness to be the priority. So I found the unicorn, a Black woman therapist with an autistic child who understood, the complexities that she was dealing with, and clung to her. She was part of our program. She saw her twice a month. The other thing that I did, which I don't know if it was in this group, but I found a math tutor, a Black woman, who I absolutely just cannot praise enough. She is,
What's her name?
oh, her name is Melanie. Her business is Infinite Minds Tutoring. She's on LinkedIn and Instagram. Melanie Young is her name, but she got a graduate degree, I think, in math from University of Penn. Young. When I said dyscalculia and dysgraphia, which a lot of people are like, what is that? She was like, oh, okay. Then I know exactly. Gave me a whole program for
Can
her.
you tell people what dyscalculia and dysgraphia are?
So dyscalculia is the inability to understand simple math concepts. So she can do 8th grade level math, but if you ask her to count 4 plus 4, she has to use her fingers. So it's like it's a processing. It's also, which I've recently learned, is it's time as well. So she can be in the shower for 2 hours and it feels like 15 minutes. And I would be like, why are you in the shower so long? You have to know. And she'd be like, Mom, I wasn't in there that long. Yes, you are. You know, we would have these discussions until I learned that it's beyond math. You know, it's time, it's quantity of time. So we had to start using like timers a lot in whether it was work or whether it was chores or what she needed to do, and just finding how to support herself. Another thing that dysgraphia is it's kind of a processing, which is focused around writing. So her writing didn't look like a 10-year-old writing. She would drop the capitals, the punctuations. They struggle with the sound of words. So vocabulary, she did really well with, but because she would know the words, but not be able to write them the way that they're supposed to. So what the school system does with dyscalculia is they just treat it as a math learning disability. And so they would put her in classes with kids struggling with learning math, when it's not the learning the math that's the problem. It's the fact that she needs support. So she needs to use an adding machine, and so that she doesn't have to like take all day with her fingers and that type of thing. But what the two together can really create a huge sense of frustration, because with dysgraphia, she could read. She was reading Harry Potter in like 2nd grade and comprehending it. But if you asked her to put it down on paper, she struggled because her hand, the processing from her brain to her hand was slower than the way her brain processed information. So she would have what they called a scribe in school. And now I have to be that scribe. So if there's a book she's reading and we need to summarize it, she has to tell me what's in her head, and I can write it down, because she can't get what's in her head down on paper fast enough.
And that's more common than people realize. I actually was a note taker in college. That was one of my jobs for student support services at my school, was to be a note taker for folks who had that struggle, and just taking notes. And you're right, it's just the mind goes so fast. And even when I was teaching public speaking, helping with outlining is very helpful as well, to break down the thoughts and to that, because that process, because the idea of speaking or writing an essay or a speech is very overwhelming and as a whole, but breaking it down into bite-sized parts, a lot of times we don't realize that when you break down a process, it helps people that have that challenge with seeing the whole and being very overwhelmed by it.
So I think a big thing that helped her as well was giving her the ability to learn about her own processing disorder. And so this handwriting brain body disconnect was an amazing resource for both of us. It was adaptive techniques that you can use in the classroom and at home. And so for me to read it, but also was powerful for her to read it, so that she didn't feel like she was stupid or that something was wrong with her, but that she understood, she learned to understand how her brain works. And then she now finds, other ways to adapt and to support herself. So the other thing that we used was, she also has synesthesia, which is A lot of artists have it. I'll try to, link the book. There's a link for it. I'll drop it in the chat. She's a musician. She has perfect pitch. She plays 4 different instruments, but she also sees music in colors and musical notes and colors and numbers and colors, which was another struggle with math, that the tutor found out that when they were using kind of like Montessori blocks, which were color coded, like to her, 9 was brown, but if you had a block that was red that represented 9, it was confusing to her because, again, her brain worked differently.
Wow.
So I found there's a book written about a child with synesthesia called A Mango Shaped Space.
Can you move it a little over some?
This way.
Probably the other way, yeah.
I'll find the link.
Oh,
I'll find the link to drop in the chat so you can keep talking.
Yeah, it's by Wendy Mass, Mass. And again, there was something that she could read that helped her understand, because she was seeing these colors and feeling like she was a weirdo and something was wrong with her because nobody could understand what she was dealing with. I let her teach herself digital art. She's an artist and she wanted to teach herself, so I let her teach herself. She did want to take classes in wheel throw, so she's really become a really good potter, and that may be the way she supports herself. I don't know, but she loves it. So I'm an accountant and I did accounting work for the local community arts center, and so we get 40% off of her classes, so she can take any classes that she wants.
Oh, I love that. That's right. Take advantage of those opportunities. And I actually want to pause right there, because I think what's incredible is that you basically created a space where your child could engage in self-directed learning and pace herself and really create a routine that was aligned with what her needs were. And so it became less about responding to, again, academic challenges, because that wasn't the issue so much as having these expectations from external factors impact and tell her what needs to happen now, and not allowing her the freedom to create a routine for herself. And that's something, regardless of whether or not your child is identified as having special needs, that's really something that all children really can find some benefit in. Some require more of a structure, more of a routine, more direction, but having some ability to have some say in what that flow looks like has been proven to be beneficial for all children. And so I want Amelia to be able to jump in to share what some of the resources were. I appreciate those resources that you've shared. I put the 2 books in, but as Amelia is sharing, if you have other resources that you want to put in the chat, I think that would be helpful. Amelia, can you tell us a little bit about what your resources, where you started to pull to curate this experience for your 6-year-old?
Yeah, so the resources started off with, I'm not sure if it was first being a part of Black Family Homeschool Education or Scholars, or on Instagram, but Khadija, you are familiar with Nakanda, the Homeschool Whisperer?
Yes, ma'am.
So yes, so I'm not sure how we met, either through Instagram or whatnot, but she was the first consultant that I reached out to pretty much tailor, how should homeschooling look for a child with early education. So that was beneficial. Of course, this group was another resource that I pulled from, really was from her virtual schooling when we did virtual during COVID. Some of the tools for early education, skyfall.com, or I think it's Star Sky or Skyfall. I'll end up putting that in one of the chat groups. But that was a good resource that she uses. Also, we have a couple of speech apps that we use that was beneficial for her. So PBS Kids has a lot of fun stories that if you use the app and kind of tailor to your age group, it really lets you go into like how to, articulate words and the meanings for it. So we're basically a very tech savvy, or she is. Robin's a tech savvy girl, so I have to learn how that works. But those are some of the resources just from the kind of virtual online. But in person, we do a lot of outdoor activities. So we do take in our community. So Robin loves nature trails. So her dad would take her on nature trails when they go out of town. We have a nature trail near us that we go to whenever the season kind of works for us, because Milwaukee is like 50 different climates in one day. But yeah, she's outdoorsy type of person. So I would say the art museum, she loves going there, and also just trying to take in some of the free activities that we have in the community. Like downtown has a few free events that we've been engaging in this summer, and then we love the farmers market. So Robin is someone who likes to bake. She loves cooking, so we'll draw in things from that, and that kind of plays into how we do our schooling and learning. So those are some of the resources, just out of the top of my head, I can think of.
That's a great collection. Ebony's asking, was it starfall.com that you were speaking of? Starfall?
I believe so. Right.
Okay,
Yes, I think so.
starfall.com.
Thank you.
So I want at this time for folks to ask any questions that they may have of our two guests. You now have some context as to what their challenges were when their children were in traditional school spaces, what that transition looked like, moving from a traditional school. And when we say traditional school space, we're talking about private, public, charter school, moving from that type of compulsory education to homeschooling. Are there any questions that you all may have? And I think we have a small enough group where someone can come off mute for right now to ask their question if they have a question for our guests.
I have a question.
Okay.
Thank you all so much. It's been really informative, actually, just hearing your journeys. So I said in the chat earlier, I have a 9-year-old son who has ADHD and anxiety centered around school. So I really connected with a lot of what both of you all were talking about as far as your experiences. I'm really interested, just going into it, of course, curriculum, because we want to make sure I'm not, jacking them up even more than school did, right? But as far as finding curriculum for children who process information differently, I have really started to feel like in just trying to search on my own that a lot of the advertising practices are kind of predatory for like parents like us. So it's really hard to really sift through and get like a good resource of, no, these are actually tried and tested by parents like us, who are homeschooling kids with exceptional needs. So I just wondered if you all would share some of those resources, or if you had a favorite blog or anything.
So for me, I would say when I started off, I was very heavy in curriculum, and that was really a couple of years ago. So I would say, I'm have to think. I really modeled pretty much what she was doing in preschool to kind of just transition a little bit for her. So, for her age group, you're still doing the math, the sciences, the language arts, and so forth. So I really didn't have a curriculum specifically. But what I did learn is the curriculum can only take you so far. So I would not really, my opinion is I wouldn't really focus too much on curriculum, more so on having, your child pretty much show you kind of how they're learning. So you can actually draw on from your own creativity, look at YouTube and kind of go with kind of what activities and stuff with math and so forth, and kind of adapt it to your home. So I would say start off there first and just see how your child receives that subject. And that will really let you know if they're curriculum based student or if they're more freestyle as far as learning.
That's a good point. Tonita, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I would ditto that. I've never used technically curriculum. Like I said, she's an avid reader, so books, YouTube for any interests. You know, like I said, our first year, I just thought I had blown homeschooling. I had to have a portfolio, and I thought we didn't have anything to put in this portfolio. But then I would go back to like the museum visits, and she showed me something on her iPad. I'm thinking she's just goofing off with TikTok. And she actually learned through TikTok. She found like a community of Black female animators and programmers, and she learned how to program her iPad. She took some kind of audio clip from a movie, coded it into her iPad. So when her iPad battery went below 5%, the voice from this movie person came on and said it's going below 5. I think it was Iron Man or something.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there like, add that to our portfolio, you know, like this is what you're doing, okay? Like,
and I love that you just said that. Add that to your portfolio, so the portfolio becomes more of a documentation of the things that they've done, and it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's curriculum driven, where you've created what the lesson is going to be. And you mark it, whether it's correct or not. You are literally creating a portfolio of these learning experiences and the outcomes from these learning experiences. That's brilliant.
so the only
And
thing
then,
I'm
sorry. Go ahead.
I really do is just kind of say, okay, we need like a couple of days this week where you're doing something with science. What is that going to be this week? And like I make her commit to some kind of idea. And that could be like HelloFresh. We would get HelloFresh kits. She wanted to learn how to cook. I didn't really have the time.
That's brilliant. I don't know why I had not thought of those cooking kits until now. Oh my God.
And the kids loved it. Like everything was in portions. She didn't have to stress about like measurements, and she could chop up stuff, and I didn't even have to be in the same room, and got food.
And then for me, as far as again with curriculum, at like I said, in the beginning, I was really focused on curriculum, but then I learned, because of Robin's particular traits and stuff with autism and her having ADHD, I started modifying a lot of her curriculum, if you will, or her studies into self-regulation, because I think it was mentioned before, you were taking time with your daughter to like trying to get her to kind of just, de-stress a little bit even before, starting her day. I noticed with Robin, if she also has insomnia, so at times it would take maybe about a half an hour to 45 minutes just to get her to, calm down a little bit, because she didn't sleep as much, and then she wakes up cranky. So a lot of those retooling as far as homeschooling kind of goes with life skills and self-regulation, when you're dealing with kids that has, those special attentions and needs. So that's part of the curriculum too.
I love this idea of stepping outside of this paradigm of what traditional schooling has taught us is the way that learning happens, and understanding that all of these everyday experiences are actually teachable moments, learning experiences. And I do want to share that when my daughter was in preschool, that the teacher had that conversation with me to try to give me the impression that something was, my daughter had a development issue, because she would get up in the middle of instruction and go to the class who had stations, and she would go to the writing station. When she was done with her work that the teacher was going over, she would get up and she would go and start to write. And the teacher met with me to imply that this was a developmental issue for a 4-year-old. I think she had just turned 4.
Oh, wow.
And so when we left Baltimore and came to the county that we're in, I wanted her to continue to be in preschool or kindergarten. And they have this test that the parent's not allowed to be in. And my daughter was not able to start school. So I had to put her in a private school, because they said, again, she was not developmentally ready, because it was around following directions. And eventually, long story short, I know it's too late, she eventually got tested and then was considered gifted and talented. And so I say all of this to say that a lot of times these descriptors are inaccurate, and is based on just what a lot of times these educators, these schools, these institutions are socialized to believe is an indicator of a child's potential. And what we're learning and what we know is that a lot of these labels can impact also how our children begin to think of themselves as learners. And so Tonita and Amelia, thank you so much for sharing your stories, because what you're sharing is that your child had this particular label while they were in school, but when you pulled them out to homeschool, you began to respond to what their individual needs were and to create a learning environment that was suited for them as a learner instead of the other way around.
Absolutely,
and so,
yes.
yes. So we've come to the end of this session, but I ask you both kindly if you would, engage with folks in your marketplaces. Did I create marketplaces for both of you? But I'm not sure, because I don't think you told me a business to put in there. But look, Amelia is the queen of the group chat. She tries to hype it, y'all. She be trying to get y'all to come and talk to her in the group chat, and y'all be, I be holding you down. I be responding.
Thank you, Khadijah. I love it. Thank you.
But if you all can go, Amelia, if you can, if we can take this conversation in the group chat, and if you all who are on the call can go and follow our two wonderful speakers to the group chat and ask them any other questions, if you can share those resources so that they're still in the group for the next months that this site will be available to folks. I would love you both. I love you dearly anyway.
Yes,
but I will
love
be
you,
most
Khadijah.
appreciative if you can do that. How's that sound?
Yes, I will be on the BFHES virtual group chat for the remainder. So if anyone wants to chime in and follow that chat group, I'll be in there just kind of highlighting what I love this whole entire sessions and any questions.
All right, ladies. And with that, we end this wonderful session. Thank you to everyone who participated. Thank you, Tonita. Thank you, Amelia. Much appreciation. See you later. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.